In a story that has stunned the corporate world and warmed hearts across the internet, one of the country's most powerful executives found herself saying words no one could have expected. "I don't have a husband, can I have a date with you?" It happened late one evening in the gleaming headquarters of Sterling and Rowe Corporation, a top-tier logistics firm run by the formidable CEO, Amelia Rowe. Known for her precision, her unmatched discipline, and her refusal to blur the lines between personal and professional life, Amelia had built a reputation as a leader feared by rivals and respected by peers. Yet that night, under the dim light of her glass-walled office, the image of perfection cracked, revealing something rare beneath the surface. Vulnerability. It was after hours, the kind of quiet that only comes when ambition finally falls asleep. The offices were empty except for the faint hum of fluorescent lights and the sound of one man cleaning up after another long day. Daniel Reeves, a janitor and single father, had been working this shift for nearly 3 years. He never spoke much, kept to himself, and was known by most only as the quiet guy with the kind eyes. That evening, as he mopped the polished floors of the executive wing, he noticed Amelia still inside her office. Her posture was tense, her face drawn with exhaustion, her laptop glowing against the darkness. To most, she looked unapproachable, untouchable, but to Daniel, she just looked tired. He moved carefully past her door, not wanting to disturb her, until the moment his hand slipped and his coffee cup tumbled to the floor. The sound startled them both. Coffee splattered across the pristine marble tiles. Daniel immediately dropped to his knees, flustered, apologizing repeatedly. He expected anger, a reprimand, maybe even a report to HR. But instead, the CEO stood up, walked toward him, and knelt down beside him with a handful of tissues. It was a simple gesture, but it froze him completely. For the first time in years, she wasn't commanding a meeting or making a deal. She was just a woman helping clean up a mess. As they wiped the floor together, something changed. The tension of status melted away. Amelia let out a quiet laugh, soft and human, and Daniel looked up, surprised. She smiled, not the polished, practiced one used for board meetings, but a real, tired smile. "It's just coffee," she said lightly, "not a corporate disaster." Her tone carried a warmth that caught him off guard. He had never heard her sound like that before. When the spill was gone and he began to gather his things, Amelia asked him to wait. "You work late every night," she said, glancing at the cleaning cart. "Don't you ever get tired?" Daniel shrugged. "I do," he admitted. "But I've got a daughter waiting for breakfast in the morning. She makes it worth it." That answer seemed to catch her attention. "You're a father?" she asked. He nodded. "Single dad," he said softly. "Her name's Lily. She's 7. Lost her mom 2 years ago, but she's the brightest part of my life." The office fell silent for a moment. Amelia looked at him, and for reasons even she couldn't explain, something in his words reached her deeper than any success ever had. She turned her gaze toward the city skyline outside, her voice quiet when she asked, "Does she miss her mother?" Daniel nodded again. "Every day. But I tell her mom's the brightest star in the sky. That helps her sleep." Something flickered in Amelia's expression, a mix of empathy and longing. For years, she had hidden behind the armor of power, avoiding personal questions and burying loneliness under late-night emails. But now, hearing about a little girl's bedtime story from a man society barely noticed, she felt something break open. She hesitated, then said almost under her breath, "I don't have a husband." When Daniel gave her a puzzled look, she met his eyes, her voice trembling but sincere. "Can I have a date with you?" The world seemed to stop. Daniel blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. The CEO of Sterling and Rowe, a woman featured on magazine covers, interviewed by global networks, was asking him, the janitor who cleaned her floors, out on a date. He stammered, trying to find words, but she continued before he could speak. "You don't have to say yes," she said, almost shyly. I realized tonight that I don't remember the last time I had an honest conversation that didn't involve profits or deadlines. You talked about your daughter like she's your world. I think I forgot what that kind of love feels like." Daniel stood there frozen, his mop still in hand. For a long second, he didn't know what to say. He wasn't a man used to attention, let alone from someone like her. "Ma'am," he began carefully, "I don't think someone like you should be seen with someone like me." But Amelia just smiled. "Maybe someone like me needs someone like you," she replied softly. The exchange lasted only minutes, but it would ripple through the company for months to come. By the next morning, quiet whispers filled the building. Security guards and late-night staff spoke in awe about how the CEO had stayed behind with a janitor, laughing, talking, and later, according to one elevator camera, leaving the building together. To outsiders, it sounded like fiction. To those who had seen it, it was something else entirely, a rare glimpse of raw humanity breaking through the glass walls of corporate hierarchy. "She looked free," one staff member recalled. Like for the first time in years, she wasn't pretending. No one knew what would come next. Was it just a fleeting moment of emotion, or something that would change both their lives? What was clear was that Amelia Rowe, the woman who had built an empire through control, had finally stepped into something she couldn't control at all: genuine connection. In a world where people measure worth in paychecks and titles, this small, quiet encounter challenged everything. A janitor and a CEO shared a floor, a laugh, and a truth that neither could ignore. That night wasn't about wealth, power, or prestige. It was about two lonely people meeting in the most ordinary of moments and realizing that kindness, not class, is what makes us human. And as one witness later put it, it didn't feel like a scandal. It felt like a story that needed to happen. Before that unexpected night changed the rhythm of her life, Amelia Rowe had lived in a world that revolved around achievement and precision. Her days were planned down to the minute, her image carefully polished to reflect perfection. Every decision she made built another layer of distance between her and the ordinary world. She was the daughter of a banker and a professor, raised in private schools, taught that emotions were distractions and that success demanded solitude. Over the years, she had turned herself into exactly what society expected: a woman of discipline, strategy, and power. But behind the sleek office doors and the luxury car rides home, Amelia was hollow. She had once been engaged, years ago, to a man who admired her ambition, until he realized he could not compete with it. When he left, she decided love was a weakness, and she filled her heart with work instead. Her empire grew, but her laughter disappeared somewhere along the way. Daniel Reeves existed in an entirely different universe. He lived in a modest neighborhood, in a two-room apartment where every corner carried a trace of his daughter Lily's world: crayons scattered on the table, fairy tale books stacked beside her bed, and a tiny pair of shoes by the door. His mornings began before dawn. He prepared Lily's breakfast, brushed her hair into messy ponytails, walked her to school, and then caught the first bus to the city. His life was quiet but steady, shaped by love and loss. His wife, Emma, had been the anchor of their small family until illness took her away far too soon. Since then, Daniel had carried on with the gentle strength of a man who couldn't afford to fall apart. He worked as a janitor not because it was his dream, but because it gave him just enough to keep his daughter safe and smiling. He was not bitter about his circumstances. He found pride in earning his living honestly, and even though he often returned home exhausted, Lily's laughter made every ache worth it. When Amelia unexpectedly invited him to dinner, Daniel tried to refuse. His instinct told him that people from her world didn't mix with people like him. He imagined how others might see it: a charity gesture, a strange whim, or worse, a cruel joke. But the sincerity in Amelia's voice left no room for doubt. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was trying to remember what it meant to feel alive again. She told him, half embarrassed, that she hadn't had a real conversation in years that wasn't about numbers or strategies. She had forgotten what it was like to talk without a script. Daniel understood that kind of emptiness in his own way. Loneliness was a quiet companion in his life, too, and so, despite his hesitation, he agreed. Their first meeting outside work didn't happen in a high-end restaurant or a glittering ballroom, but in a small, cozy Italian place tucked away on a side street far from the city's business district. Amelia had chosen it deliberately, wanting a place where no one would recognize her title. For the first time in years, she walked into a room without her assistant, her security, or her schedule. Daniel arrived nervously early, wearing his best suit, an old, slightly worn one he had once bought for his wife's memorial service. His hands shook slightly as he waited, but when she walked in, smiling gently and looking almost shy, his nerves faded. There was something disarmingly real about her. Stripped of her usual armor of confidence, they talked for hours. Daniel spoke about his daughter, the way she drew pictures of stars because she believed her mother lived among them. He talked about the challenges of being both a father and a mother, and how he sometimes stayed up late worrying about the future. Amelia listened, not as a CEO or a superior, but as a woman who had forgotten the sound of ordinary hope. When she spoke, it wasn't about her company or success. She talked about her childhood, the pressure to be perfect, and the loneliness that came with always being in control. She admitted that she hadn't celebrated her birthday in years, that she didn't remember the last time she went for a walk just because she wanted to. Somewhere between laughter and quiet confessions, the boundaries of class and status melted. For a brief evening, they were just two people sharing stories about loss and love, two souls who had been running in opposite directions yet somehow met in the middle. Daniel noticed that she didn't check her phone once. Amelia noticed that he never once looked at her with awe or judgment. There was no performance between them, just honesty. When word of their dinner began to spread through the company the following week, reactions were immediate and mixed. Some whispered that the CEO had lost her mind. Others speculated that she was simply trying to prove a point about equality. But those who knew her best recognized a quiet transformation. Amelia's once rigid tone softened in meetings. She began greeting employees she used to walk past. The same woman who once fired a manager for being late now paused to ask how a receptionist's sick mother was doing. She hadn't lost control, she had gained perspective. Daniel, meanwhile, found himself at the center of gossip he never wanted. Colleagues in the maintenance department teased him, calling him Mr. CEO's choice, while others admired him in silence. Yet he didn't let the attention change him. When asked by a coworker why he thought Amelia had chosen to spend time with him, he answered simply, maybe she saw that life isn't about where you work, but how you live. Amelia began inviting Daniel for lunch at the company cafeteria, ignoring the raised eyebrows that followed them. When questioned by one of her senior managers about whether it was appropriate, she replied, "I don't believe kindness needs permission." That single sentence made its way through the building like wildfire, sparking conversations about respect, humanity, and class differences in the workplace. Employees began to look at the janitors, drivers, and clerks differently, not as invisible background workers, but as part of the same human story. Behind the public whispers, something deeper was forming between Amelia and Daniel. It wasn't the rushed spark of a secret affair or the drama of a scandal. It was quiet, steady, built on mutual understanding and the realization that love can appear where it's least expected. Daniel admired her strength but cared more about her sincerity. Amelia admired his humility and the peace he carried even in struggle. For the first time in years, she felt seen not as a symbol of success, but as a person capable of emotion and imperfection. Her transformation didn't go unnoticed by the board, some of whom worried that her growing empathy might be seen as a distraction. But Amelia was unbothered. When one investor questioned whether her emotional involvement could compromise her authority, she calmly replied that compassion was not a liability. "If leading with heart makes me less of a CEO," she said, "then maybe the world needs fewer CEOs and more humans." Daniel continued to live simply, still waking up early, still walking Lily to school. Yet something in him changed too. He carried himself with quiet confidence, not because of attention or approval, but because he had been treated with dignity by someone the world considered untouchable. Their connection didn't erase their differences, but it bridged them in a way that felt real. In a time when relationships are often measured by status, power, and appearance, their story became a quiet reminder that true connection doesn't need luxury or approval. It needs honesty. Two very different lives had crossed in a place neither expected, between a mop and a marble floor, and in that small act of kindness, a story began that would redefine what love and respect could mean in the modern world.